welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Eliza. I've got my detective Scoot Doggy Dog here, ready for all of his bacon. Today is True Crime Tuesday. So last week we talked about poor little Judith Barsi and her story, and one really eerie component of that story was her break into TV was playing a little girl in, hey there buddy, the TV series Fatal Vision. And then a couple of years later, her own father would murder her, which is just terrible. And Fatal Vision was a series adapted from Joe McGinnis's true crime novel. So that's the story we are going to dive into today. But before we do that, let me calm my dog down. Land shark, we're going to pause for a quick promotion. And I am promoting myself today. I just took a little trip to one of my favorite places in my area. It's called Magic Wings. If you're anywhere near Deerfield, Massachusetts, I would totally recommend checking them out. Anyways, I'm promoting these. Magic Wings is this amazing butterfly sanctuary where you can go inside and just walk around or sit with the butterflies, and they have koi fish and these little button quails running around too. You have to see it, but it's a dreamland. And after the butterflies do pass, they sell their wings in the gift shops, and me and other local artists buy them and do some pretty cool things with them. I make jewelry, and if these look cool to you, they will be in my Etsy store, and the link is down in the description. You can go ahead and grab a pair today. Butterflies symbolize transformation and change. I'm feeling that more than ever lately, especially this week. So yeah, check them out. But let's get to today's story, and today we're going to the early 70s. Charles Manson and his little gang of terror had just become infamous, and everybody was talking about the horrific acts that these drug-fueled hippies had committed. The senseless, ritualistic violence for seemingly no reason left Americans feeling slightly disillusioned about their own personal safety. That's another story for another time, but it does tie into today's story as well. The Manson murders took place on approximately August 9th of 1969, and we are going to begin our story just about 6 months later, on the evening of February 17th of 1970. That evening at 3:42 a.m., a call would come into the dispatchers at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. The caller would say, "Help, 544 Castle Drive, stabbing, hurry." And then the caller would just drop the receiver. When the police would arrive, they would find that the couple that lived in the apartment, Collette and Jeffrey McDonald, they were laying on the floor in the master bedroom. It was just a brutal scene. Collette was clubbed and stabbed to death both by knives and with an ice pick. Her stab wounds were so bad that her trachea was severed in 2 places, and her husband Jeffrey was laying face down on her with his head on her chest. Upon further inspection, although he was wounded as well, he was still alive, and he whispered to them, "Check my kids, I heard them crying." So they would, and they would find the couple's 5-year-old, Kimberly, brutally bludgeoned to death and stabbed, as well as lying in her bed. Her face was so damaged from the attack that she sustained that one of her cheekbones was protruding from it. And across the hallway was the second little girl's room, and this girl was only 2 years old. She was still laying in her bed with her bottle next to her, and she was covered in over 30 stab wounds. They would find the word pig scrawled in blood above the headboard in the master bedroom. Jeffrey McDonald was helped up and yelled, "Look at my wife, I'm gonna kill those goddamn acid heads," before he was placed in a stretcher and just brought to the hospital so his injuries could be attended to. And he would end up making a full recovery and would tell the police that that evening his wife Collette had gone to a college course that she usually went to, and He is bitey today. Whew. And when she got home, they would watch Johnny Carson together. Collette would head to bed before the show was over, and he would stay up and read for a little bit before he did the dishes and then headed to bed himself. He worked as a doctor, and he had just finished up one of those 24-hour-long shifts, which sounds, side note, sounds like a literal nightmare. I can't even fathom how those are legal, but that's another thought for another time. When he got to his room, he saw his wife and his younger daughter, Kristen, snuggled up together, but Kristen had wet the bed. It was an issue that both of his girls were struggling with at the time, so he carried her back to her room and went back to the couch to try and sleep so that he wouldn't have to wake his wife up and disrupt her and change the sheets. Instead, shortly thereafter, he was awoken by his wife yelling, "Jeff, help, why are they doing this to me?" He jumped up to see, and he was able to see that there were 4 intruders inside of his apartment. 3 were male and 1 was female, and she had long blonde hair and this wide brim floppy hat. And she also had a lit candle and was chanting, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." They would attack him with a club and an ice pick while the female yelled, "Hit him again, hit him again." It was like he was living his own version of the Manson horrors. His shirt ended up kind of over his head, and he was using it to kind of ward off most of the ice pick attacks, but eventually he was overcome by his assailants. He was knocked unconscious. He would regain and lose consciousness to make the call for help and to try and help his wife, and that was ultimately where he was found by the police. Jeffrey ended up sustaining a mild concussion, a stab wound to his torso, and a punctured lung. He was treated and released within 9 days. Buddy. The police suspected him right away for a couple of different reasons that we are going to get into, but the Army would formally charge him with 3 murders on May 1st of that year, and they held an Article 32 hearing where the judge would say that there was insufficient evidence to prove that Jeffrey was guilty, and he would end up receiving an honorable discharge, and the judge would note that the nature of the murders led him to believe the perpetrator or perpetrators were either insane or on drugs. Which, fair. He would have civilian authorities investigate a woman named Helena Stokely, who was known to the police as a blonde lady who liked her drugs, basically. And initially, officers believed that they saw her, but it may have been a different blonde lady while they were driving to the McDonald household before they knew Jeffrey's story. To him, it was looking more like a Manson copycat than a domestic job. So let's get to know Jeffrey a little bit better. Jeffrey McDonald was born on October 12th in 1943 in Queens, New York. He was the middle child and raised in a poor household to a father who was described as a nonviolent disciplinarian. Interesting. He did very well in school, though. He was kind of one of those golden children, voted most popular to succeed. He had great grades. He was the head of his student council and the king of his prom. He was that guy. In 9th grade, he would meet Collette Stevenson, and they would date for a little, but then break up the next year. And he would go on to graduate and head off to Princeton to study medicine. It was there that he would resume his relationship with Collette and visit her in Saratoga Springs, where she was attending school. He was definitely still dating around, though, which would be a theme for him, but he would decide to get more serious with Collette when she became pregnant. So on September 14th of 1963, they would get married, and their first daughter, Kimberly, would be born in April of 1964. Jeffrey would note that Collette was on the shyer side and she had a slight fear of the world in general, and he found it touching that she relied on his strength. He would graduate from Princeton and they would move to Chicago so that he could attend Northwestern University Medical School. Their second daughter, Kristen, was born on May 8th of 1967, and he would begin a thoracic surgery internship in New Jersey, after which he enlisted in the Army in June of 1968. He was stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina as a Special Forces physician shortly after that. That's enough for now, pal. Before they moved there, family took vacation to Aruba because his internship that year was just beyond brutal on them, as those kind of internships are. Once they settled into Fort Bragg, they were well liked by their neighbors, and right before they were murdered, Jeffrey bought his daughters a Shetland pony because they had news that they were going to be transferred up to Connecticut. Hang on. My dog is a beast. He kept it a secret, and his daughters drove out to the stables on Christmas and were surprised by this awesome little pony there, which is adorable. And the girls were really cute as well. Kimberly, the older one, was described as more shy and intelligent, and Kristen was described as this feisty little tomboy who would crack anyone bothering her big sister, which you can kind of just picture that, and they just sound adorable. Shortly before they were murdered, Collette would write a friend from college and say her life was never so normal or so happy. She and her husband were content, and her baby son was on the way, due in July, and that when he came, her family would be complete. That's right, she was 4 months pregnant when she was brutally murdered. Why, when their lives were literally at the pinnacle of coming together, as she said, on paper anyways, would Jeffrey MacDonald murder his perfect little family? It would almost make more sense that it was a freak Manson copycat. So Jeffrey was free, and he would move to New York City to work as a physician for a little bit before relocating again to Long Beach, California in 1971, where he would work as a physician in an ER there. He would also become an instructor at UCLA's medical school and date a whole bunch of women before settling on a flight attendant named Candy Kramer. And as a former flight attendant, her long hours and days away would have been perfect for his nasty ass. Poor girl. Anyhow, he was living it up in California and got pretty vocal about the unfair investigation into his family's murder. He would go on the Dick Cavett show and be vocal about his criticism of the Army, laughing and coming off as just really arrogant. And Colette's stepfather initially had supported him, but kind of watching him carry on like this made him start to question things. Jeffrey also was acting reluctant to get him a copy of the transcript from his Article 32 hearing, so he ended up getting his own transcript. And the inconsistencies in the things that Jeffrey was saying really started setting off his internal alarms, so much so that he actually started campaigning against him. And he would campaign for him to be charged in his family's murder. Apparently, you can go to the district attorney's office if the police aren't doing anything about something and there is enough evidence, they can approve it and go ahead and prosecute someone. And this is true for federal court as well. And the stepfather ended up being successful. And on January 24th of 1975, Jeffrey would be indicted of 3 counts of murder. The judge would have to deny double jeopardy and speedy trial arguments and went on to propose a trial date of August 18th of 1975. Then it became a bit of a roller coaster because 3 days before the trial date, the Fourth Court of Appeals ruled to stay the proceedings and further ruled that the entire indictment be dismissed on the grounds of the defendant's right to a speedy trial being violated, and this happened on January 23rd of 1976. Jeffrey would weep tears of joy, but this time the government would appeal, and a little over 2 years later, the United States Supreme Court would rule that the Fourth Circuit Court erred in dismissing the indictment before the case had been tried. Yeah. So that happened on May 1st of 1978, and his trial would finally begin on July 16th of 1979. On August 29th of 1979, Jeffrey would be convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder for Kristen and 2 counts of second-degree murder for Collette and Kimberly. 4 members of the jury would actually cry when they would read his verdict, and his mother would run from the courtroom. And as for Jeffrey, he wouldn't display a shred of emotion. He would be sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life in prison, and in 1980, these terms were overturned in an appeal. He would be released on bail, but in 1982, the Supreme Court would rule against him, and he would be sent back to prison. He would keep losing all of his subsequent appeals. Talk about a frickin' roller coaster. He still to this day maintains his innocence as well, and there are camps of people that believe both sides. I believe he's guilty of sin, and I'm going to go over more of the evidence that leans that way with you guys, because we did kind of lay it out as best as I could the way that Jeffrey wanted everyone to see it. Drugged out hippies strike again, which first of all, but thankfully the Manson murders were such a horrific incident, although obviously there are many other terrible things that happen. There aren't many incidences that are quite like it, thankfully. So this was not the beginning of a new trend, as Jeffrey was kind of hoping to lead everyone to believe. The one really thing that kept this argument afloat and alive was this character, Helena Stokely, and she did a darn good job at it too, because she didn't remember that night at all, and she would testify that she might have been there and participated, and she had no idea. And she said it. She even confessed and then recanted, but there was no physical evidence of her in that house. That's the most important thing. And she went back and forth so much that she did not really know what she was doing, to the point where it really did help that camp and help the defense. Like, this lady was so drugged out that she could have helped to kill a whole family. But there was no other physical evidence to support this theory. In my opinion, Jeffrey just got really lucky that Helena came around in the way that she did. Who knows, though? But, I mean, Jeffrey knows. Anyways, Joe McGinnis, who wrote that book, Fatal Vision, knew Jeffrey MacDonald in real life, and he went into writing it thinking that he was innocent, and by the time he was done, he believed he was guilty as well. And why? Well, the more you dive into it, the more you can see that Jeffrey MacDonald is full of shit. So let's just start with the unlikelihood of something like the Manson murders happening again. Not 100% unlikely, copycats happen, but it's up there in unlikeliness. Combined with the Esquire magazine detailing these murders that was found in the apartment, in the living room, on the table, that probably, but not definitely, but probably was stage flipped. And you have the blood evidence, which that doesn't lie. Besides a fake blonde hair, which could have come from anywhere, there was only the DNA of 4 people in the house. Well, 5 counting the little one, but there was no outside DNA. And with a crime that brutal, sure, there was evidence, gloves were worn, but no DNA at all? With drugs and drugged out hippies committing the crime, no DNA? Come on. All of the weapons used came from within the house, which could go a little bit with the hippie narrative, but in most cases, if you were going to go into a house to attack someone, you would more than likely bring a weapon with you. Of course, there are exceptions, and there have been, but it would be more likely that you would bring a weapon with you. Then the severity, just the complete overkill used to kill Collette and the girls compared to Jeffrey's wounds. Jeffrey was stabbed once. Collette was stabbed 27 times with an ice pick, 16 times with a knife, and she was beaten badly with a club on top of that. Kimberly's skull was basically bashed in with the club, but she was also stabbed 10 times with a knife, and tiny little Kristen was stabbed 33 times with a knife and 15 times with an ice pick, compared to Jeffrey's one stab wound. Also, his shirt was stabbed in a manner where it was clear it was placed over someone or something and then stabbed into, and not flying around defensively as he had described. But beyond that, let's get into the DNA evidence because it paints a story as well. Jeff's blood was not in the living room, and the whole living room appeared to be staged. The majority of the blood was in the master bedroom, and then there was some in Kristen's room as well. Jeff's blood was not in the living room, but it was in the kitchen near where he kept his rubber gloves. It was also found near the bathroom sink. Collette's blood was both in the master bedroom as well as in little Kristen's room. Kimberly's blood was mostly in the master bedroom, but her body was found in her room. Kristen's blood was in her room and also on Jeffrey's glasses. Fibers of Jeffrey's pajamas were found under his wife's body in the rooms of both of his daughters, and even one of them was under poor little Kristen's fingernail. And the bed wet that Jeffrey was talking about was Kimberly's and not Kristen's urine, as Jeffrey recounted in his version of the events. This would have been significant because he specifically stated that it was his younger daughter who wet the bed, and then he describes putting her back to bed, which is not usually what he did when his daughters wet the bed, according to Collette. You see, in one of her college classes, she was discussing this issue with her classmates, kind of venting about the issues she was having with her daughters, and she brought it up, and she would say that usually she would have to go to sleep on the couch and that her daughter would stay in bed with Jeffrey. And everyone thought that was weird, because it is. But either way, him bringing his daughter back to bed and then leaving his wife in bed was not what she described as the usual thing that happened when one of them wet the bed. And he recounted the wrong daughter specifically, which indicates that he was lying, because after his 24-hour shift, in all likelihood, he got set off when his 5-year-old wet the bed that he was trying to get into. We can't know for sure, but something must have set him off based on the severity of the crime scene. Kimberly and Colette's blood were all over the master bedroom, so something set Jeffrey off, and he ends up just annihilating them. The club used was a piece of wood that was supporting part of their bed in the master bedroom. So really only Jeffrey and Collette would have known that it was there like that to grab it. And either one could have, but intruders wouldn't have known it was there like that. So after he killed his family, he moved their bodies to their rooms and attempted to stage a scene, and then stabbed himself once and called for help. At least in my opinion, and the opinions of many others, it seems, he had approximately 15 extramarital affairs going on at the time of the murders. Asshole. I can just see him dating 15 other women, coming home after a 24-hour shift, and his wife, this stay-at-home mom, I'm with you, we're having another baby, and you can't even get your 5-year-old to stop pissing the bed? Boom! Maybe she snaps and grabs that piece of wood and tries to get him to stop beating their little girl, and that's how he got his head injury. But instead of stopping him, he grabbed it from her instead and just started beating her. And then he hit Kimberly with it. And he hit her so hard he bashed her head in. And after he did that, he knew he couldn't stop, so he didn't. Only he knows for sure, but he's not cracking. Pretty sure that's close to what happened though. Anyways, in 2019 he ran out of appeals, and in 2021 he tried to get a compassionate release due to his age and health. Can you believe his audacity? But he is ineligible under a federal law for crimes committed before 1987, so there's that. And for today's positive thought, I'm still completely out of positivity myself, but I will say, nothing is worth an ending like that. If you are with someone abusive, cheating left and right, if you have children, get help before you're, I don't know, another headline. There is a domestic violence support link in my description, and I know it's so easy to say get help, and if you're a parent and you can't do it for you, do it for your kid or kids. And that's all I've got. I'm cutting our real facts. Scoot's still going to join us, but he's not going to have a real facts or positive highlight for the moment. I'll probably bring at least the positive highlights back. I want to be positive. I want to promote positivity. The sun will shine again, but that's all I got this week. And I'm fresh out of Bacon's, buddy. We're going to have to go grab another bag or probably grab a walk because darn. Yeah. Till next week, guys. Stay safe out there. Bye.